Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's up, gang? Great to have you with us. It is time for Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily on a Wednesday, hump day. Welcome to the program. Andrew Paterson, Michael Remis with you. And listen, we're still in the dog days of summer, but with the Olympics coming up, we've got an unfortunate story to talk about right off the bat. Apparently, we are the Patriots of women's soccer. We'll dive into that and what has happened with our women's national team heading into their opening game after a drone scandal of scouting. Somewhere Bill Belichick is chuckling as he gets ready to watch the Olympics. We'll touch on that. Of course, the big news today in Canadian sports and in the National Hockey League is the hiring of Stan Bowman. Bowman was introduced today in Edmonton as the general manager of the Edmonton Oilers, and obviously this was going to be a controversial appointment. Social media has been blowing up. There has been plenty of takes on both sides. But Stan Bowman spoke today about what he's been doing for the last 2.5 years. We heard from Jeff Jackson in the organization. We'll hear a little bit from Bowman, and we'll talk about this decision for the Oilers to go forward with Stan Bowman just a couple weeks after his reinstatement from the National Hockey League, getting another opportunity to be a general manager in the National Hockey League, and not just any gig. The gig in Edmonton with two of the best players in the league. And, of course, a team that came within one win of winning the Stanley Cup championship in the spring. We're also going to talk some Bombers. And, of course, CFL 110 is coming up today right after Winnipeg Sports Talk. So make sure to stick around with us and join myself and Jeff Hamilton for the latest episode of CFL 110 brought to you by Garage Living Winnipeg. But we're going to dive into the Bombers as well. Looking at the team through 7 games, looking at the offense. And, man, I'm really looking forward to bringing Doug Brown on the program. Doug was not pulling any punches on the weekend after the loss in Saskatchewan. And no one knows what it takes to win in the Canadian Football League more, on an individual play-by-play basis, as well as overall than a guy like Doug. And, really looking forward to having Doug on the program as well. We will dive into some of the offseason Jets chatter as well. And more around the National Hockey League at this point in July with Brandon Rewucki coming up. And then a little later on, because of today's press conference in Edmonton, we didn't do our normal lock shop today. So I figured it'd be a great time to get our pal Pat Gregoire from Coolbet on later on towards the end of the program. Talk about a few of the big Olympic stories and odds. And we didn't do our golf picks, so we'll also take a quick look at the 3M Open and throw a few of our favorites out later on today. And then we will get out in time because just at 3 p.m. or shortly thereafterwards, we will fire up the latest episode of CFL 110 with myself and Jeff Hamilton here on Winnipeg Sports Talk channel. Just before we do that, I mentioned Garage Living Winnipeg. Stay tuned for CFL 110. Also want to thank all the other sponsors that join us daily here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. The great people at Princess Auto, of course, Coolbet Canada. Pat's jumping on later on. Rolly's Transfer, Consolidated Supply, Manitoba Battery, F Apparel, Little Brown Jug, Wallace & Wallace, Canadian Club, The Beer Can, along with Hoagie Boys, and Next Door over on Sherbrooke in the heart of Wolseley. Wingy Wednesday tonight. Royal Sports, Boston Pizza, the Gold Eyes, who are continuing to enjoy their all-star break. Breezy Bend, last day of the AM. We'll keep you up to date on that as well. Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge. We'll do a why not question of the day for Not Autocorp at Waverly and McGillivray. And, of course, Assiniboia Downs. And just before we bring in Michael Remis, a huge thank you to Sherry, Darren Dunn, and the great people at Assiniboia Downs. Man, we had an awesome time last night. Congratulations again to our winners. We had Cowboy in the house, Joey Pankyu, who brought along WST chat legend, the Gitch, Sean Lishka, as his guest last night. Gregory Liverpool and Donnie Boy and their guests, and a blast from the past. Our old pal Joe Marcoux from the TSN 1290 days joined us as well. Absolutely gorgeous night. Food was amazing. Shout out to Lisa, our server. She was phenomenal. And the only thing we were missing was a few more W's on the tickets that I threw down. But man, just a great night. No live racing tonight, but we will be back at it Monday and Tuesday of next week. And don't forget, the countdown to the Manitoba Derby is on right now. The Derby is August 5th, the Monday of the August long weekend. All right, let's get to it. Michael Remis, get in here. Good times last night with our crew.
Yeah, great times. I actually just got an email from Cowboy Huss. Said that he was sweating out the pick 4, and there were 2 objections on the final race, and one against the winner. He did end up cashing the pick 4 for about $200. So Cowboy leaves the big winner of WST night. I was shut out. I know Donnie Boy left with some money as well. So great night out at the Downs. I hope to have some kind of video on our social media later. You know, we got to go right up close into that winner's circle. I got.
Oh yeah, pull up the picture of the photo.
Curly Asa. There's a lot of reflection.
There you go. You can see it kind of nice that way. Yes, except for those massive blinding lights.
Oh no,
but there's the crew. You can see Gitch and Cowboy both rocking the white pants. Very, very cosmopolitan. There's myself, Reem, Marcoux, the gang, Donnie Boy. Donnie's son-in-law was taking a picture of the horse while we were getting. Yes. There's never a case where everyone is actually looking at the photographer as we've been instructed when that photo was taken. But overall, just an awesome night. So wanted to thank the folks at AS Downs right off the bat for that. And you know what? We should also shout out Greg, because not only did we have a great night at Assiniboia Downs, but GFL, who is always on top of everything Winnipeg sports, fired up the Sea Bears game right on the table at Assiniboia Downs. We got a chance to follow the Sea Bears with that big comeback win, down, I believe, as much as 15, 82-70 later on in the game. This is a fourth quarter team, Remis. They power back, they win it in target score time, and get that first big win against Calgary. Rematch tomorrow night in Cowtown. And so the Sea Bears are going to the playoffs. That's first and foremost. That's what was achieved last night. If they can beat Calgary tomorrow in Calgary, they will have an opportunity, depending on what happens in the other game that they have to play, as well as Calgary's, to potentially host a playoff game before the teams move on to championship weekend. So we will definitely stay on top of that, and a big one tomorrow for the Sea Bears.
Yeah. You know, shout out to Greg. You know, we were at the table at the Downs. He pulls up the game. It was on TSN last night. And, man, what a story it's been for the Sea Bears. Just over 11,000 yesterday, setting the attendance record for the season. That was the second most attended game in CEBL history last night. So this league continues to grow, and Winnipeg setting an example for everyone. So how about Winnipeg's home record? Finishing up the year, this split, they're about 8-2 at home and 1-7 on the road. So you do want that home playoff game coming up. And I don't want to say they were in shambles, but they were at a crossroads they weren't playing well. You had to cut your MVP from last year and Teddy Allen. They've gone through a ton of roster changes. We talked about that with Mike Taylor yesterday, when last year they basically had the same team throughout the season. I think that's more of an anomaly in this league, where you're shuffling guys. Maybe you're not, cutting your MVP from last year, Huss, but they did that. They brought in Justin Ray Foreman, who's certainly taken a large role on this team. So they are going to be back in the playoffs. Will there be a home game or not? We'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens next. But yeah, big game again against the Surge.
Yeah. So, we knew it was going to start off. They needed to win. Fun conversation with Coach Taylor yesterday. And you know what? Now, can we take credit for maybe a little bit of a piece of the win with a game day WST bump? We might need the coach on again for another game day hit before. If they have another home game, I think we use that angle to try to get Mike to join us. Just, you wear the same thing, you have the same routine, you come on WST before a huge game for your team, and you get a win.
Yeah, pretty well done there by the Sea Bears yesterday. And again, well done by the Winnipeg crowd who,
What
that's
did you say the numbers were? What did you say the numbers were for the attendance for the season? We were talking about this last
okay.
night.
So Carter Brooks put this out on X last night. Said 1,051 fans in attendance, and the Sea Bears had a league high of 86,735 fans during this season, shattering the previous record that they set last year, 54,846. So, I mean, this is the first 2 years of this team, and we wondered, could basketball work? Certainly can, and the league is growing. They're adding more games next season because it seems like it ends a bit early. Us the first weekend of August, like let's extend it a bit into closer to September.
Not to fully Barry Horowitz myself, but maybe to fully Barry Horowitz myself. We talk about a lot of things on this program. You've got a lot of takes, a lot of opinions. Sometimes you look like a dummy when whatever you've thought or said blows up in your face. One of my best takes, and you will remember the skepticism in the chat before the Sea Bears came back, Remis. I was so gung-ho on this. I said this was going to work, and I thought it was going to work in a big way. And this goes back to last year for the first game of the season where they they set the CEBL record for attendance in a game last year in game one. And I believe on the season, I believe last year I said something to the extent of not only will they beat this record, they're going to average that above that last year. And it came true. It's taken it to another level. Jason Smith and his staff in the office, Steph and the entire crew have done a great job. Mike Taylor continues to work hard to put a quality product on the ice, or on the court, I should say, of the players. And it's been a very different season, as you mentioned, with all the turmoil and Teddy Buckets and Byron Mullins. They've managed to survive it. And I thought that the coach was very clear that a huge, huge part of that, the success of this team, is what the fans and the way this city has embraced it. And it's a huge part last night with that 11 plus K in the building at Canada Life Center, willing them back from that 15-point deficit. And it's just been, listen, there's a lot of stories in and around our city at times that are not good news. We've had real ups and downs with the Bombers and with the Jets. The Bombers have been plenty of ups, but heartbreaking losses at the end. The Jets have been a great story at times, disappointment in the playoffs. The Sea Bears is so much more than just, the wins and losses on the court. It's about really establishing a new basketball culture and having an outlet for fans of the sport from many different cultures to come together and have a hell of a time. And I'd like to say I thought it was going to be this good. I was really confident that this was going to work, but this team and this organization is the standard now in the CEBL, and you can see other cities and teams following suit, and it's a great thing for hoops in our country.
Yeah, 100%. And, speaking of hoops in the country, look towards the Olympics with the men and the women coming up, but the Sea Bears setting an example, and I think the Bombers have been that standard in the CFL as well. So Winnipeg fans coming out and showing the rest of the country, how you support their sports here. And I am looking forward to seeing the CEBL grow. It's still very, very young, the sixth season. Again, adding more games. We've had the commissioner, Mike Morreale, and their vision is good. They've got this deal on TSN. We saw Chuck Swirsky calling the games. And when there's a game in Winnipeg, it feels like a big league game, the game production and everything. So well done on what they've created here.
Well, and just if you haven't been to a game, and hopefully there was a bunch of people that went to their first game last night and saw a great one. The thing that I do love the most, well, maybe not the most, but one of the things I absolutely love about not just the Sea Bears, but the entire CBL is the target score. Every game you go to is won on a walk-off, on a game-winning shot. And the visuals of the arena with those teal lights that come on when the Sea Bears win is so cool. We watched that final shot with on the tube. with the gang at our table at Assiniboia Downs. And I was missing being there last night, but fingers crossed we can get another home game. And that'll be something we'll follow for these final 2 games of the regular season. But the Sea Bears are in the playoffs. Congratulations to the entire organization for the win last night, and another massive crowd going into the upper deck at Canada Life Center. As I mentioned, Bombers back on the practice field today, getting ready for the Toronto Argonauts. Huge matchup for these two teams. Toronto losing last week to Hamilton, their arch rival. The Bombers coming off a loss to their arch rival, the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So something's got to give. But there are big questions about where the Bombers are at right now at 2-5. You know, I did listen to a good portion of the coach's show on Monday. And listen, full respect for Mike O'Shea. He, is putting on, the same face that he has every day that he's come to work. They believe in the team that they have. There's a confidence moving forward. There are things that they need to do better, but they believe they can do it. The difference this year, as opposed to the last 4 years, is we're still waiting for this team to really get going. Now, they've had adversity. They've dealt with a lot. I mean, some serious injuries, especially on offense. But questions about where Zach Collaros is at right now, how Buck Pierce can get more out of what he has, and can this team get back into the mix, along with the likes of Saskatchewan and especially the BC Lions, who they play twice, home and home, after this game against Toronto. So we're going to hit all of that with Doug Brown coming up a little bit later on. But Remo, the big story today, and you knew that whenever this happened, it was going to certainly dominate a good portion of social media circles, but I would say hockey media as well today. Stan Bowman back in the National Hockey League, and he's not just back as a consultant. He's not back kind of getting his feet wet, easing into another role in the National Hockey League after being reinstated a couple weeks ago. He is the general manager of a team that will in all likelihood be the Stanley Cup favorite going into next season, the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, and the Oilers offseason rave reviews for what Jackson has done filling in, but he's not going to be the GM for going forward. Bringing in Stan Bowman, and a lot of questions about him. Since being, I don't want to say kicked out of the league has for his role in the cover up of the Kyle Beach situation in Chicago. Want to hear what he was going to say. He's got a recommendation from Sheldon Kennedy last week, which holds some weight. And I thought he stepped up to the podium and, sounded like he's putting in the work to become a different kind of person. You're trying to move forward. But I think there's some questions like, does he deserve a second chance? And is he even the guy worthy of taking over this job? As, a lot of some of the moves he made in Chicago towards the end of his tenure, maybe didn't work out to be the best. So we'll see what happens with them. They've got big questions on the hockey side about Leon Draisaitl's expiring contract, but I think a lot of the questions were more off-ice related today at the press conference.
Yeah, and listen, I knew there was going to be a ton of hot takes. Listen, Stan Bowman is part of a very, very ugly chapter in NHL history. And, what happened with the Chicago Blackhawks during that period of time, with the Kyle Beach situation was, deplorable. And listen, a lot of people paid a big price for it. Stan Bowman's been out of the league for the last 2.5 years. Joel Quenneville, arguably the best coach in the league. He hasn't coached again. And listen, they had to pay a price for it. Listen, if this was my team, I would be somewhat skeptical, and I'd want to hear what had happened over the course of the last, few years, and how, first and foremost, nothing like this would ever happen again. But what sort of amends that these individuals have paid. And listen, I haven't been on top of this story on a daily or weekly basis over the last number of years. But Stan Bowman's been living it. And I totally understand that there's a lot of people that aren't cool with this. It is interesting how we live in a society of second chances, usually. But there are some things that turn people off to the extent that they, whether someone has the right to do it or the opportunity to do it, doesn't make people feel any better than when it actually happens. But listen, if Bowman, and I would say Quenneville as well, everybody involved in that, I mean, if they have paid their price and done what they had to do to get reinstated, and there's an organization that is willing to give them a second chance, and they're willing to back that decision, I think we have to live with that. I mean, there have been people that have done some pretty bad things in the world of sports that have been given second chances, and I would include these individuals in that group. But I think, to me today, what I wanted to hear, knowing that this was happening, is how the Oilers got to this decision. How did they feel comfortable with it? And most importantly, where is Stan Bowman at, and what's happened over the last 2.5 years to earn the trust or to earn a second chance with the National Hockey League, but also the fans and stakeholders of the team that he's going to. And that team is the Edmonton Oilers. Here's a clip. This is Stan Bowman's opening statement today. He met the media today as he was introduced as the new general manager of the Edmonton Oilers. And Stan Bowman had this to say right off the top.
Yeah, I can tell you in this room and everyone watching, as well as something I've said directly to Kyle Beach, that my response was inadequate back in 2010. I didn't handle things properly. I should have done more, and that's something I regret, and it's something that I've had a chance to reflect on and try to learn from. As he mentioned, I've had a chance to get to know some people in the last couple of years, Sheldon Kennedy being one of them. In addition to Sheldon, I've had a chance to work with his group. I've also had a chance to work with Kyle Beach and other people. And in that process, I feel like I've learned some things that I didn't know, and I've learned ways that I could do a better job in the future. And I can tell you, without a doubt, that those things will never happen on my watch again. I'm looking forward to a chance to make a difference in the organization. And, my work with Sheldon has encompassed a couple different areas, in particular with working on the culture of hockey. And I think the situation with Kyle Beach and back in 2010, I think it's become something that we've talked a lot about. And I guess to summarize, it would be, we want to try to make this a better place for the sport better, and I think we can all handle situations better. And the only way to do that is to learn from the mistakes that were made and try to improve. And I'm committed to that.
All right, so there's what Stan Bowman had to say. I mean, obviously, this was a lengthy presser. There were plenty of questions from the assembled media, most involving, Stan's return to the game, how he's different, what he's done in the past. But Remis, you mentioned right off the bat, I mean, there's been contact and work with Kyle Beach over the last few years. I believe I read that he was an assistant coach at Trinity Western University, and Stan, has been working with Sheldon Keefe and Sheldon Kennedy and the Respect Group. And listen, when we're talking about this, Sheldon Kennedy was the victim in probably one of, if not the most notorious sexual abuse scandal in the history of hockey, with in the Graham James. And he has devoted his life to raising awareness, to making the hockey world, our country, a better place, to supporting victims. And I'll tell you what, if you want another chance and you want to better yourself and, and come to where Stan Bowman apparently is today and getting this opportunity, I don't think you could work or have a better person in your corner than Sheldon Kennedy. So I get why there are such hot takes. And listen, a lot of people are far more forgiving on some things than others. And there was terrible, terrible judgment made by the individuals that had the opportunity to stop what happened with Kyle Beach. And there was a secondary, the thing that stands out to me the most that I will always question and have a tough time getting over is the, just trying to get rid of the problem and writing the recommendation letter for Bradley Aldrich to move on, get another opportunity in coaching when that guy had absolutely no business being around any players, never mind minors, and someone else was abused. So, there was a major, a price to pay. They didn't get into that, the second one, and I believe because of the agreement, there's a non-disclosure agreement with the Blackhawks that, the secondary victim cannot be named, and that's not talked about it. So, I don't know really what to say on that. But tell you what, when you've got a guy like Sheldon Kennedy in your corner there today, who also answered questions after the press conference about it, listen, do we believe in second chances or don't we? And what do we cancel people permanently for and never allow them another opportunity? And at what point do people deserve it? And that's what this entire thing comes down to. I have a lot of time for questions about the Oilers hiring Stan Bowman as a general manager, like outside of everything that we just mentioned and talked about. There certainly is an argument that he got there on third base. I think someone said, I got there on third base and there was already a deep plop fly in the air. He won 3 Stanley Cups. And, the other side of this is that we live in a sports world where it's like, and I think this is really dumb at times because this is a team game and there's so many variables and things that go into winning. But people ask, well, has this guy won anything or hasn't he? He's won 3 Stanley Cups. Paul Maurice done a lot for a long time. He is thought of absolutely differently today than he was a year ago because he's finally won the Stanley Cup. The Oilers feel like they're on the verge of winning the Stanley Cup. They feel like Stan Bowman's a guy that can help them get to where their goal is. They feel that he has done what he needed to do to earn another chance, and he gets that. And that's not going to satisfy everyone. I know there's a lot of people saying they're done with the Oilers. We'll see about that, come the season when the building's packed again and Connor McDavid's out there and they're winning games. But it was a decision that brings on a lot of baggage. There's no doubt about that. We'll talk about it with Brandon coming up, as well as some other stories right away. I mentioned Bomber fans, stay tuned. Aaron Grimes was signed 2 years out of the game to maybe come and help fortify the defense. He's on the practice roster. We'll get to all things Bombers at the top of the hour with Doug Brown coming up. And then at 3, just right after we finish the show, we'll go directly into CFL 110 with Jeff Hamilton and take us around the living on that. The CFL, and I've got to thank our friends at Rolly's Transfer. Gang, if you got a move coming up, take the stress out of it as much as possible and get the white glove treatment on all of your most precious belongings from our friends at Rolly's. Family owned and operated for over 60 years in Winnipeg. Rolly's is the most trusted name in moving, and they've got a brand new website where you can simply go in and check out all of the services that they've got for you, as well as, listen, their logistics business takes them throughout Winnipeg and southern Manitoba every day. So it's flexible rates, flexible routes, and great rates, I should say, to take you and your family and everything you've got onto your next move. Head on over to Rollies.com. Click on the website, top right request a quote feature. Let them know what you're looking for, where you're moving, when you're moving, and when they'll turn it around right away with a quick and very competitive quote and get you moving on to your next spot. On your next move, don't make it anyone else. Make it the most trusted name in moving for over 60 years in Manitoba. Rollies. Request a quote today over at rollies.com. Shout out to our friends at Consolidated Supply. Of course, the gang at Consolidated Supply have been very busy this year. We've had quite a bit of water, and Consolidated Supply are the leaders in irrigation systems and solutions for both commercial and residential properties. They've also got artificial turf for your property. You need a golf cart? They've got they've got new ones. They've got used ones. And they've got amazing mods to maybe check out the one that you've got already. They've got other great options for your property, hot tubs, amazing outdoor kitchens, and they are the leaders in small engine parts and repair. You got to see it in person. Pop by Consolidated Supply showroom, open to the public, 1395 Niagara Road East, or find out more online at cte.ca. And shout out to Donnie and the gang at Manitoba Battery, powering us Manitobans through another great summer. Whether you're on a boat on the weekend, you're fishing, you're camping, you're on an ATV, you need batteries for all of those things. And Manitoba Battery allows you to shop local and get the best prices in town, period, beating the pants off the big box stores. Pop by and see them on Logan Avenue, their new location in the South Side on Dovercourt Drive, or go to manitobabattery.com and check out all the batteries and the great deals they've got going on right now and throughout the year. And hey, we know you're busy. They've also got the best service in town. Give them a phone call or order online at manitobabattery.com, and they'll deliver it to you for free with any purchase over $60 inside the perimeter. It is just that easy. For all your battery needs, it's Manitoba Battery. Check them out today at manitobabattery.com. All right, let's get Brandon Rewucki in here. Rew, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Not too much going on in my world on a Wednesday afternoon. How are things over there?
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, this would not be the busiest time of the sporting calendar, although a bunch of stories that we're kind of getting to. I mean, first of all, Canada, we're the Patriots of women's soccer, apparently. You hear about this? I mean, I'm going to kind of dive into it a little bit more, but kind of scandalous, and the things that we always love talking about when it's someone else, but pretty embarrassing for our program to be sending coaches home. Bev Priestman, our head coach, not on the sidelines for the opening game against New Zealand, kind of casts a bit of a pall over our team heading into the Olympic Games. But listen, we usually start off talking hockey when you're on the program. And the big story is Stan Bowman, now back in the National Hockey League after being reinstated, and pretty nice landing spot, I will say, as the general manager of the Edmonton Oilers. What's your take on all of this?
Yeah, I just found out about 10 minutes ago, so I try to do some quick reading here to catch up on the story, but I don't know, man. It's pretty conflicting. I mean, obviously, with something like this, there's a lot more gray area than it is just black and white. In general, I think it's important to try to give people second chances anytime somebody's made a mistake or an error or whatever it is in life. And I always try to lean towards that. And I know Stan Bowman has apparently reportedly done a lot of work with Sheldon Kennedy, which to me would have been mandatory for this to even be a discussion point, considering all Kennedy's done in the hockey world over the last several years. But I mean, for me personally, Huss, that to me, I just wouldn't hire anybody involved with the Kyle Beach incident ever again in the NHL. I think there's more than enough qualified candidates in the hockey world for the Oilers to have found somebody else to come in there. And I appreciate and I believe when Sheldon Kennedy says Bowman's put the work in and he's recognized what he did wrong during that incident. And I'm not doubting that for 1 second, but I also think there's consequences to actions. And that's pretty much what it boils down to for me. Is just if I was running the Oilers, it would be a non-discussion point. We wouldn't be bringing anybody in like that. But obviously, the NHL operates in a different manner. In terms of the, I guess, debate or argument about what he's done with Chicago on an on-ice perspective. I mean, that one's kind of interesting because, like you said a little bit earlier on, he's got 3 Stanley Cup rings, which is about as celebratory as it can get there. But for every good movie made, there was a bad one as well. Like it's a pretty volatile sheet that he's got there in terms of different moves that he made that, a lot worked out for Chicago. A lot of them didn't, and maybe took down a dynasty that could have pushed over a little bit more into the late 2010s. So I'm interested that Edmonton felt, especially with where they're at as an organization, where it's cup or bust no matter what, that they felt like the blowback they know they're going to get in this is worth it to lock up Stan Bowman to manage that team at such a pivotal time where you need to win right away. But you've got Leon up as a free agent at the end of this year and Connor up as a free agent in 2 seasons from now. I have to imagine they were brought to, this was brought to their attention before the move was made. Maybe it wasn't.
Jeff Jackson actually said it wasn't. He said that, much like when they hired Chris Knobloch, I mean, the players, he said the players don't want to be involved in those. I mean, and listen, I'm sure if McDavid wanted to go full LeBron, he would be able to do whatever the hell he wants. But I think it's partly the nature of the hockey players, but also not to have that on your shoulders to be the guy. And I mean, listen, it was unfortunate for McDavid when Knobloch came in. I mean, who didn't think, his old junior coach is coming in? Well, obviously, this is all about 97. And the decision itself may have been centering around him when they made it, but he was not involved in it. And it doesn't sound like, any of those players were consulted. And I think that's probably the best way to go about it, because especially for something that is such a controversial topic as this, you don't want to put your star players in positions where they're backing the guys or they're a part of a decision like this. So
yeah, I get that. That's fair, but I also think maybe not dry, but McDavid is the exception to the rule, especially in a situation like if they hired, Bill Zito a few years ago. Like, yes, you don't need McDavid's blessing to do something like that, but like this is one of the most controversial GM hires we're ever going to see in the sport of hockey. Mm. I think you owe it to the face of your franchise not to, necessarily bring him into, ownership and management meetings and have him discuss different candidates and things like that. But to kind of, hey, just a heads up, Connor, this is going to happen, or this is the direction we want to go in. Like, give us your thoughts on this, because I don't know if McDavid came out tomorrow and was completely against it, this would be beyond a fiasco for Edmonton here. So I think McDavid and maybe 1 or 2 other guys are kind of the exception to the rule, where it's like, hey, we need to just kind of run this by you. Let us know if you're vehemently against it, and then we'll discuss after that. But yeah, I mean, look, there's no doubt.
Well, you know what? Maybe they did do that and they just didn't cop to it, because the thing is, like, imagine if they came out and said, actually, yeah, we talked to Connor and he is fired up. He's all behind this. He thinks that this is exactly what we need. Like, what does that do to McDavid as a superstar, as the face of the franchise? So all of that. I mean, I do come back. I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, you wouldn't want to work with the guy. I mean, I guess this comes down to, are we serious about giving people second chances? What do they have to do to earn them? I mean, there's a lot of guys that have done criminal things. And we can argue that there's a criminal nature to this, a criminal negligence, I guess, of it. And I'm certainly here for that discussion. And it seems like, we often welcome people back with open arms after drunk driving, after sexual assaults, after violence. And this, listen, because of the positions of power these guys were in and the way they handled it, it was a disgrace to the Hawks organization. And I know there's tons of people, myself included, that still don't believe that they as an organization really paid the price. The individuals did. I mean, they fined the team a few $1 million. I mean, I saw someone in chat mention, the Coyotes lost a first-round pick for doing some extra testing on kids at the combine. The Hawks never paid and listen, that's a fan's perspective because, we look at the competitive nature and how they were able to continue on as a good team. Now, obviously, they've cratered since, but guess what happened? They bounced back with Connor Bedard. And just watch, they're going to be a very, very good team. Maybe not next year, but in a few years with a real superstar. But I do struggle with it. Would I want my own team to do that? Would I feel comfortable if I was in that position bringing a person on? But I do think that everyone owes it to, just to the way we do business in this society, to at least not make that statement before hearing out what the people have done, what the work that they have done. Because I will say this, and Bowman said this, and I think Kennedy echoed it as well through his work. Stan Bowman, because what he's done, what he's been through, what he's had to do the last number of years and the work that he's done, I would argue that there's probably a less chance of something like this happening anywhere around Stan Bowman than probably anywhere else in the National Hockey League, even though he was involved in this before. So again, it is one of those conversations that there's no real right answer. Everyone is going to have a passionate opinion on this, but at a certain point, if someone has done what has been required of them, and if they've done enough work to convince someone that they are going to get another chance, I have a hard time being that guy that said, this guy deserves a second chance, these guys don't, and, make it the value judgment on myself to do it. And now the job for him is to show and prove that he has learned and that there's a benefit to him and the work that he's done to the people that he's going to be working with. And hopefully the hockey culture, as they mentioned overall, that's a big part of why he had been so central working with Kennedy, with junior teams over the last couple of years, not only to better himself and put himself in a better spot to potentially be able to continue working in the sport that had been his life, but also hopefully to make a positive impact before we even got to today.
Yeah, and that's kind of it's a difficult part in there. It's like I think I would feel a lot better about where I stand if hey, this is the work that he's done, right? And it's been, hey, he's done X amount of hours in, management training, in terms of victim abuse training, different things like that. Like there's a lot being thrown onto Sheldon Kennedy's plate here, where people it feels a little bit like Sheldon Kennedy says it's okay, so you have to take him at his word. And that might be true. It's just I don't know. I don't know how sincere. I mean, none of us will know, really, right? Unless you talk to the guy, how sincere Bowman is and how he feels about this and what he's done to get the work in and everything like that. I guess I don't know. What it comes down to me is this too. Is like if my son got drafted by the Oilers, would I feel comfortable Dan Bowman being in the exact same position he was the last time he was in the NHL and that took place? Probably not. I think
more so than somewhere else. I mean, I don't know. I think I'm on the other side of things. I mean, if someone has already been through this and this is part of their history, like as I said before, I think it's far less likely that anything is going to happen even close to that around the Edmonton Oilers now than on some team that's never had any, the San Jose Sharks, or just pick a random team, partly because of the spotlight around them and what they've had to done. And just quickly on Kennedy. Sheldon Kennedy didn't have to be there. He didn't even have to entertain working with Stan Bowman for the last couple years. So, I mean, I will say, if you want to talk about someone that is about as close to unimpeachable on this topic, Sheldon Kennedy's the guy. And if he feels strongly enough that he's done a lot of positive things, has learned, is in a role where he can actually be a positive influence and is willing to stand up and talk about it the day that the guy's hired, I don't know. I'll trust him a lot more than people that are angry and throwing stuff out on social media, I guess.
Which is totally fair. I don't know. I feel like you can have all of the backing and things like that and have a different job in the hockey world, as opposed to immediately just going right back as GM of a hockey team. And part of it too, I think you're right in the sense that I think, Bowman and some of the other members of the Chicago management team maybe feel more heat from the outside because the franchise as a whole got less than a slap on the wrist. So it's like there's a demand for more punitive justice, if you will, toward like I can kind of understand that a little bit. I just think it was such a disgusting incident, doubled down by the fact that, like you mentioned, the letter of recommendation. Now I don't believe Bowman was involved specifically with writing that. I think that was more Quenneville, right? But then the fact that Brad Aldridge could go out there again and cause harm to, at least one other member of the hockey community. The whole thing to me is just so disgusting that it's great that you put in the work and you've done things to better yourselves. But I wouldn't want that coming into an organization or a workplace that I was a part of.
Yeah, and someone's asking, Dan Jetson, that has to a 180. I mean, not really. I mean, I haven't really had a strong position on this. I mean, I think I wanted to see how things played out, and listen, if any of these guys was ever going to get another job again in the National Hockey League, listen to, the argument that they deserve it, and that was made today. And again, it'll fly with some people, it won't fly with some others. But again, I just, in today's day and age, I mean, we jump on, individuals and particular things, and, their lives are ended right away. Now, listen, the person we need to be concerned about is Kyle Beach. And I think that, from what we've learned today, there's been a lot of contact through that, from the two of them. He said he spoke with Kyle for about 15 minutes yesterday before going in. And actually making this announcement, so he was aware of it at all. And I mean, there had been contact, and as I mentioned, he worked with the team at Trinity Western where he was coaching with last year. I just have a hard time, I mean, considering some of the things that we allow second chances for, like, where does it now? I mean, if he was the perpetrator of this, I don't think we're having the same conversation. But some will argue that what those individuals did in turning a blind eye to it and just focusing on the playoff run and thinking that they could deal with it a little afterwards. And then, as you mentioned, what ended up happening once they got rid of the guy, is criminal negligence that led to it. And, you basically got a hand in it as well. So it's just, listen, I see so many hot takes and unequivocal opinions on this, and I like what you said. I think this really is sort of a gray area. I mean, there's no doubt that people involved in this needed to earn another opportunity, and from what I heard today, Stan Bowman has been doing exactly that. And when you've got a guy like Sheldon Kennedy that had been working with him for the last couple years, willing to stand up for you, I think that goes a long way with a lot of people. I will say this, for the Oilers, from a hockey perspective, they must really believe that this is the guy to do it, because, as we mentioned, I mean, it brings on it brings on a lot of baggage. And I mean, listen, this is not going to be popular in, I would say, probably most circles, if not the majority of them, at least around Edmonton. But when you've got a team that's put together, that did what they did last year, and an off season that they've had, I don't know whether Jeff Jackson feels like he can just, listen, I'm going to make these decisions and hopefully people believe me and hopefully they will give this guy another chance. But there's a lot of other situations of guys that are maybe not as strong in their position that Jeff Jackson is, that probably don't go to this. Anyways, we wanted to get to that because that certainly is kind of dominating the story today. And now that he gets, to work, I mean, the one thing, just to push this to hockey for a minute, pretty clear marching orders for Stan and the rest of the organization of what they need to do. I mean, Oilers overall had a pretty impressive, at least on paper. I mean, we always love to give the offseason champions and tell them to raise the banner. Oilers might be that team. But it's all about what happens next. And that's the Draisaitl contract, Evan Bouchard contract, and then the following year, Connor McDavid.
And I'm going to assume emptying the cupboard, the prospect cupboard, to to chase a Stanley Cup this year. I mean, that's the one thing. Like, you look at Bowman's track record in terms of what he did as a GM and moves made. Like, he wheels and deals as much, if not more, than anybody. And that's kind of been a lot of Oilers fans' angst about the team, is that they felt like Ken Holland was too passive in terms of giving up assets and going all in. It was a little bit more of a slow burn in a lot of instances. So yeah, I think there's definitely an appetite for activity to take place for Edmonton this year, which is interesting too, because they traded their first round pick after this season to Philadelphia to select a guy at the end of the first round in this year's draft. So like, they're already a little bit low, but I mean, there's no doubt that whoever was taking the job, it's like you got a 2, maybe 3-year window to win a Stanley Cup. And I would think it's a 2-year window to win a Stanley Cup, or else we'll find somebody else to do it. So in my best estimate, when general managers are put in that position, draft picks and prospects basically mean diddly squat. So I imagine Edmonton gets a little bit aggressive to fuel up the push for the playoffs this upcoming year. And I wonder what that means and what it is that they ultimately go for.
How long do you think it takes? Like, do you think they get a Draisaitl deal done? And does that happen before the season? I mean, that's the best case scenario for Edmonton. If they can get that done, knowing that he's there long-term, it helps with everything else, not only a little bit of cap certainty, but man, that's going to be a big deal. And then it's going to get topped in a big way by 97.
Yeah, I think it's more on Leon than it is on management. Like, if he wants to sign, he will. If he's having some doubts or maybe wondered about other things, and this is going to get pushed on, like I guess I'll say this: if Leon isn't signed halfway through the season, it's not from a lack of trying by management. It's because Draisaitl's he's not 1,000% in on being an Oiler for the next 6, 7, 8 years. Doesn't mean he won't sign. But I think it at least opens the possibility that he might be looking elsewhere. And that's the thing. You don't know, like, how much is being top dog on your own team important to him? Because even with all their, not like there's a lot of them, but even with their roster deficiencies, hard to argue that, being riding shotgun with Connor McDavid doesn't give you the best chance at winning the Stanley Cup, right? So I guess then maybe some of it depends on what they do in the postseason too, right? Like, maybe he wants to see how the regular season goes and the playoffs go. And if they feel like he's not close, well, maybe there are greener pastures elsewhere. So I kind of think he's not going to sign before the season. But I don't think that means that he's not an Edmonton Oiler for life because of that. I just kind of get the sense that maybe he'll let things play out a little bit and then see where it goes from there.
B, before we go, let me quickly ask you, it's the WST thermometer test, hot or cold on Perfetti's new deal. Where are you at as we sit here today at the end of July? More likely a longer-term deal that buys up a couple years of free agency, or a bridge deal?
Ooh, I'd feel really good about putting money on it being a bridge deal. I'll be shocked if it's not. It just seems like, one, this is kind of what the Jets have liked to do in more recent history. They did the exact same thing with Gabe Vilardi last year. And I think from Perfetti's side too, pretty much any young guy, but from Perfetti's side of things, like, take the 2-year deal, hopefully get more minutes, more scoring opportunities, and then you cash in on a big one just after that. Plus, it gives you a little more flexibility. If you have any doubts about Winnipeg being your long-term home and maybe getting a shot playing closer to 19, 20 minutes a night, the short-term deal seems to make the most sense there. So I'll even give you a number, Huss. I'll go 2 years, 3.75 is the contract that Cole Perfetti signs in 6 days, just before the end of July.
Really? Interesting. I think it's going to take longer. And the more I think about this, I think it's more likely to be I'm on the other side of this.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, first off, because I think there's something to be said about getting the money now and then getting out of that deal. Like, I'm not necessarily saying an 8-year deal, but a 6-year deal that all of a sudden, first of all, he's getting paid. He's going to get an extra $2 or $3 million for the first 2 years. he would not be saying thanks, but no thanks to over $30 million based on, with his injury history. And then the other thing is that if it's a 6-year deal, he's a free agent again at 28 or 29. You do the 2-year deal and then do the long one. Then all of a sudden you're where Scheifele was and you're re-signing this thing at 31. And as we know now, that is a very, very different scenario.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. We've got 7 days till your next visit. And if we're talking about the bridge deal that is done, you're going to be getting you can self Barry Horowitz yourself on the program. Brandon, great stuff, man. Keep up the great work at Skates and Plates. We'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good, man. Have a good week. We'll talk then.
Right on. Okay. We're going to talk about this women's soccer scandal a little bit later on, but coming up in just a second, we're going to get into the Bombers. Cannot wait to have Doug Brown on the program. Of course, all our Bomber reports brought to you by Princess Auto, the proud sponsors of the home of the Bombers, Princess Auto Stadium, and of course the Princess Auto tailgate parties before all Bomber games, getting going 2 hours before the game. Make sure you're taking part in that if you're heading out to Princess Auto Stadium. Princess Auto, founded, headquartered here in Winnipeg, 2 locations, Panet Road and Portage Avenue West. And of course, Princess Auto has the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. I can tell you, next Thursday when the Lions are in town, they better stock up on the Canadian Club. I'm not sure there's any left in the province between everything that was consumed at the Comedy Festival, at Super Spike on the weekend, and of course at the Manitoba Stampede. But don't worry, Bomber fans, you'll be good to go. Canadian Club, the official spirit of the Bombers, throughout the stadium. And of course, also selling Canadian Club and ginger ale in cans. Great drink for the summer. Pick it up at your local beer vendor. And of course, the entire Canadian Club family of spirits and CC and ginger available at your local Manitoba liquor marts. And hey, got to shout out our friends at Wallace and Wallace, gang. If you need to, if you have a need for a new fence, why not get it taken care of by Wallace and Wallace, the expert since 1946, taking care of you with vinyl, ornamental, welded wire, chain link, or wood fences. And of course, the biggest and best selection of garage doors in town as well. Give Wallace & Wallace a call, 204-452-2700. The Wallace & Wallace team will arrange a time to come out and give you a free estimate. You can also visit them at wallacefences.com or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Crescent off of Kenniston. All right, this has been a long time coming. Really appreciate a very busy Doug Brown taking some time. You know him as one of the all-time greats in Blue Bomber history, and the truth serum on 680 CJOB Blue Bomber radio and broadcast. Doug, welcome to Winnipeg Sports Talk. It's great to have you on. How are you?
It's good to talk to you, my friend. I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing well, but like a lot of people that have skin in the game and love the Blue Bombers, it has been a strange first month and a half or so of the season. Expectations so high, and listen, when you play at a standard that the Bombers have for so long, it comes with high expectations. But the first month of the season was kind of stunning to see this team 0-4. And then just as we thought, okay, maybe it's turning around, we saw more of that. I mean, big picture, 2-5. How surprised are you that the Bombers are where they are right now, considering our preseason expectations and the guys they had on the roster?
Yeah, I've had 7 weeks to get used to it, but it's still, I still run into people almost every day and they just look at me incredulous and they're like, what's up with the team? And I'm like, I just don't know. You can't stay at the top necessarily forever. I'm like, maybe this is a different way to get things done, right? They've always been front runners the entire regular season for the last 4 or 5 years. So, the opportunity's still there. They can still make a go of it. A lot of things are going to have to change. And, this is a very veteran football team. They understand that it's going to be about how they're playing in September and October. That is going to determine their future. They just lost to a team last year in the Grey Cup, Montreal, right? That just got hot at the right time and was able to get a championship because of it. So, all is not lost right now at 2-5, but things get more critical with each and every regular season game that goes by.
You know, I'll be honest, going into the season with some of the players that were lost and knowing the difficult decisions that Kyle Walters had to make as far as who was going to get paid and who was going to be back, and you saw Brady come back and Dalton Schoen, I was sort of the opinion that this defense might take a big step back, but the Bombers had enough offense that, you know, it'd be fun for a fan. You want to go out and win games like they did against Calgary a couple of weeks ago, sign me up for it. I mean, 41-37 points all over the board. Fantastic.
Good times.
I will say this, and let me get your perspective on it. I've actually been really pleasantly surprised by what this defense has done, especially considering the injuries they had early on. Like, the record is what it is, but I don't feel like it's on Jordan Younger's unit very much. I mean, they haven't been perfect, but I mean, to me, they've been giving the Winnipeg Blue Bombers chances to win. I mean, where are you at on the defensive performance so far?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think anytime, especially on Friday in Saskatchewan, you only allow 19 points in the Canadian Football League. That's an expectation that you win that game. And so disappointing that obviously the team hasn't been firing on all cylinders, the other phases included. And you're right. They've turned into a real blue-collar, workman-like bunch. And they've been plug and play on the defensive line. And I think we've been largely pleasantly surprised by what they've been able to do in the secondary. And I think that's the Jordan Younger touch that we've seen as the new defensive coordinator for this team, a guy that very much understands what's happening in the passing game in the Canadian Football League. And as a group, they've adjusted as such, and they've made do, like you said, with one really big star on the defensive line who's taken a lot of attention, a lot of heat right now. And the rest of the guys have just been, they've been able to get it done as a collective workman-like effort. So it's inspiring to see how the defense has been playing in spite of their shortcomings. And you just wish that would lend over to the offensive side of the football as well.
It seemed like later on in that game, the Bomber defense in particular was in an ornery mood. I have to ask you about that final play of the game. I mean, you've been in the trenches, and we've kind of been throwing this around this week. Depends on what side of the border you're on. You might get a different thought, but fair or foul, Big Hill's hit on the final play of the game. And if you're a member of that defense, what did you feel about it as you watched it happen as the final seconds ticked off the clock?
Yeah, you know, I don't want to sound prototypical, but I didn't really have an issue with it. That play played out the way it did, and that was up to the quarterback. It was his decision on how he wanted that play to end and go. He could have thrown it out of bounds at any time. He could have taken a knee. He could have surrendered himself and not been impacted at all. And I think he alluded to as much in his post-game comments, right? That he was being kind of taught a lesson in humility, maybe a little bit, by a veteran linebacker on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And that's exactly what it looked like. But I mean, there's no flag. How are people saying it's, it's in control of Saskatchewan, the Rough Riders, to determine exposure on that play? The game's over. They've won it. And all they have to do is kill the clock, which they had done, right? You throw a ball 40, 50 yards downfield, that's over. It's a non-issue. So I didn't have a problem with it. I was surprised by the outrage, but anytime Winnipeg does anything even remotely offside against Saskatchewan, we're going to hear about it till Labor Day Classic.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I thought, and it would have been interesting if that was in the middle of the game, the way Big Hill landed on the quarterback is something that is often flagged. Let me just ask you, as a former player, how difficult is it with the speed of the game when you are grabbing a quarterback, or any player, but specifically the quarterback, knowing the rules in place? How difficult is it for defenders to make sure that they are doing everything that they want to do to get the guy down within the new rules of the game, and not have that contact in, not give that extra shot and get 15 yards?
Yeah, I think you and I would both agree. In the National Football League, that play gets flagged 9 times out of 10. You simply cannot drive a quarterback into the ground and have your body weight on top, right? These guys are just, they're too valuable in terms of marketing, and obviously too delicate as well. We're aware of that. But, something I learned in my career a lot of times is, as the game evolved and went on, the rules changed. I'd get to a quarterback and I would just hold him up. You'd grab him, but you just wouldn't dare take him to the ground. If it was going to be close to being, on the line of what, if you never want it to go into the hands of an official and make a judgment call, especially at critical points in a game. You have to err on the side of caution. And so as a defensive lineman, my recommendation is always, get to the guy, grab him, but before you throw him on the ground, he better have the ball in his hand. And if he doesn't, you hold him up. Right. Sometimes you're bringing so much momentum into that, you literally hold on to him. And I've kept guys from going to the ground before. Obviously, it's a long time ago, but that's what my memory tells me anyways. But it's an increasingly complicated situation for contact on the quarterbacks. And like I say, you have to err on the side of caution whenever possible, especially at critical junction.
Doug Brown's with us. You can catch him with great commentary every single Blue Bomber game on 680 CJOB, along with our pal Derek Taylor. The big topic is the offense right now, Doug. And, we went through a few of your tweets after the game, just, as part of the conversation on Monday. What are you seeing from Zach Collaros right now, and how different is the Zach that you're seeing compared to the guy that is turned this franchise around and led them to such incredible success over the last 4 seasons?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I think Zach he's a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback. He's one of the best quarterbacks to ever come through the Blue Bomber franchise. He's a great guy off the field as well. Anyone that's talked to him, his level of humility and, the kind of teammate he is, it's a guy you'd love to play with, to be on his team. And it's just tough what we're seeing, right? Every week we're holding our breath thinking, okay, this is going to be the week where it all comes together for him. There's been a lot of adjustments, I think, for Zach Collaros this year. Obviously, a change in the offensive line, so continuity's off there. A number of changes in the receiving core, especially with injuries. So understanding what your guys are going to do on any certain play. The challenges have been there for Zach Collaros. But unfortunately, we keep seeing him commit the same mistakes this year. I love it when they change his launch point. I love it when he's rolling out. Granted, that cuts the field in half as a quarterback, and the defense can roll towards you. But some of the decisions he's made this year, we just haven't seen. I would always comment, I think, throughout the broadcast over the years that I've been covering and Zach's been playing, there'll be a ball a game that he puts up that's up for grabs without question. If you're a gunslinger, if you're a prolific passer like Zach Collaros is, that's going to happen. And I expect that at least once a game, the ball's going to be up for grabs. But the number of interceptions that have happened this year and the number of decisions that have been made that just don't make sense to me, right? And, it's almost sounded like a broken record on the postgame show. We've had him on, and he falls on the sword every time. He's accountable for it. He understands, what his responsibilities are as a captain and a leader, and the highest paid guy, one of the highest paid guys in the CFL, and he knows his performance isn't good enough. It's just, to get the real world situation out of him. No quarterback's ever going to speak badly about their protection or issues there, or even receivers. I mean, they're so linked. You're never going to get, the honest accounting from anybody until maybe they're 10 years in their retirement about why they struggled or what was happening. But it is, that's the biggest puzzle right now in the Winnipeg Blue Bombers is his level of play. I mean, 2 touchdowns and 7 interceptions and 1 win on the season. All those things are not characteristic of Zach Collaros. So it starts to make you wonder, there's a thing about football, the mental and the physical, right? And the mental doesn't really change, but sometimes your physical can't execute to the degree that your mind is telling you to. Things you can get away with, you can't get away with physically anymore. Decisions, holes or spots you could play out of, physically, sometimes it doesn't quite equate to what you're thinking or what you're processing in your head mentally. As you get older, those things can fade, and you're not. It frustrates you as a player because you're like, hey, this is what I do in this spot. This is what I do in this moment. And then you're not getting it done. So it creates a conflict in your mind. And usually these aren't good things, good omens for professional athletes because it's not always gracious and it can happen in a hurry, right? You're going from being a top flight performer to a guy that's, really struggling. It can happen fast. It can happen overnight. Well, the one thing, Zach has going forward with him, I think, is that he's such a resilient player. He's so mentally strong that every single game, every outing, we literally expect him to figure it out and to get back or to a semblance of what he was. So still a lot of games left in the season, but man, has it been a puzzle so far.
Well, and you know what, Doug, I've got a lot of time for the circumstances around the Bombers this year. You mentioned the offensive line, which took, it took some hits in the offseason. It certainly wasn't at anywhere close to the level I think we've been accustomed to seeing early on in the year, although I think they have improved. You know, you lose Kenny Lawler right out the gate. You lose your favorite target in Dalton Schoen. Got all these young guys that maybe you don't have that chemistry. Demski and Wolotarski are getting more attention than normal. Like, I'm here for some of the arguments that there have been some unique challenges that maybe haven't been there. But to your last point, you know, I was listening to you guys talk about, I mean, there was a few plays that we've seen, in particular in the last game. I mean, Pokey Wilson had 5-6 yards and plenty of daylight to get to the end zone, and a ball that, I mean, I don't know, am I wrong in saying that in years past probably gets to him with plenty of time to take it to the house, wasn't even caught. And there has been some instances where you wonder, has some of the pop gone in the arm? Because if that's the case, everything that you do, game planning and decision-making wise, changes.
Yeah. And I think, you know, when you get in a situation too where your ratio is off, touchdowns to interceptions, win-loss ratio, everything is off, I think you fight it a little bit and you start chasing it, right? And it's almost like a gambling metaphor here. The minute you start chasing something and you're forcing it and you're overthinking and you're entering a game with remnants of the last game and mistakes you made previously and prior to, it makes everything more challenging going forward. Like I said, I think Zach Claris is one of the most mentally strong athletes we've seen in Winnipeg. I mean, his ability, we all saw a playoff game where I think he had 5 turnovers in a half and came out and won the game in the third and fourth quarter, right? And there's been games where no matter how he's played the first 3 quarters, he showed up in the fourth like it was a brand new day and got it done, right? So, but it's starting to add up now. That week after week, you know, we saw Calgary, and that was exciting because it was a positive indication and looked like a return to form. But unfortunately, this year, more often than not, he's been playing at a level and making decisions and being indecisive with the football. It's just uncommon and uncharacteristic to see come from him as an athlete.
You know what I mean? I do think back to, you know, the fourth quarter of that Calgary game, and a game that had everything. I mean, a couple picks that he probably would have liked back, but I mean, a clutch 100-yard drive with the game on the line to get the win. It kind of felt, all right, we're back. And then obviously last week against Saskatchewan happened, which brings me to this week and the following two. Argos on Saturday, and then a home and home against the British Columbia Lions. And, you know, if the record was reversed, we'd be sitting here saying, wow, you know, this is a great time to be playing these teams. You can see what you're made of. The Bombers don't have that luxury at 2-5 right now. I mean, they have to win some football games. And holy smokes, is this going to be a big test? I mean, we know Toronto, even when the Bombers have been dominating and the Argos haven't been very good, it hasn't been an easy place for the Bombers to win in the past. And then obviously BC, an angry BC after blowing a very winnable game against Calgary last week with a home and home. I mean, I'm not sure where this team is going to be 8-10 games into the season. We know it won't be where they thought they'd be at the start of the year, Doug, but this almost feels like a playoff situation midway through the year, and that's not something we've talked about for 4 years around here.
Yeah, it's almost the inverse of what we've seen before, right? The Bombers would get everybody's best game, and because it was always more critical to the opponent than it was to Winnipeg, because they were sitting comfortably or just fighting for first place. And it was, are we getting a first-round playoff game with a bye or not a bye? That's literally what this football team's been fighting for the last 4 years, is are they going to finish first or second in the West, right? And do they have a bye week or not? Either way, they were getting a home playoff game. So, yeah, you're right. It is the twilight zone to hear that, you know, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are in dire situations. And I would put forth they need to at least win, you know, split one of these games. Toronto just lost, and now they're playing at home. And BC lost, and they're coming to Winnipeg. So two very good football teams, two championship caliber football teams, and the Bombers have to at least get a split. So you have to hope that situation Winnipeg's experienced so often with teams coming here and having the game mean so much more to them, that the inverse is true with the Bombers going to play these teams, and all of a sudden now the game is so much more important to Winnipeg than necessarily it is to Toronto or BC, and hopefully that is demonstrated on the field.
Do you feel like this season, more than any in recent history, there's way more parity in the league? Like, I think Montreal and BC have both looked great at particular times, but see what happens when you lose a quarterback for a game. And even BC at times has, I mean, they barely beat Edmonton. They lost to Calgary. I mean, when they are good, they look like no one can beat them, and then they go out and lose. Like, I mean, to me, it does. Even with the Bombers at 2-5, I can make an argument that this is still early in the campaign, and this really is anybody's season for the Grey Cup.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. It's pretty uncommon for there not to be a runaway football team. I was blown away when Winnipeg beat Calgary. And what does Calgary do? Jake Maier goes out and throws for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and nobody in the world had him in fantasy, right? He's the king of the wide receiver screen pass, and the rest of us all took Vernon Adams, and he threw for less than 200 yards or something. It was ridiculous. So I think it's super entertaining. It's exciting. It's a lot of fun for the fans when you don't know which teams are outright going to win or not, and yeah, that's the biggest opportunity that Winnipeg has right now for the remainder of the season at 2-5. We're almost at the halfway point. After this Argo game and the BC Lions, we'll be able to assess at the midpoint of the season, and that's pretty crazy. So the best news is nobody's running away with it, and on any given day in football, whoever brings it, whoever's dialed in the most can pull it out. But like I said, things have to start trending in a different direction right now for Winnipeg.
Doug, this has been so much fun. Just before we go, I wanted to ask you about Coach O'Shea. And I mean, listen, they may as well start building the statue right now. The guy has done so much and has, kind of presided over this resurgence of greatness for the last number of years, despite falling just short in the last 2 Grey Cups. But when I listen to Coach, right now, in a very different situation that he's been before, it's still very much the same message that we've been getting for the last number of years. You've been inside locker rooms before. I mean, you know how things sometimes to the media aren't what they seem. What do you think things are like in the coaching room right now for O'Shea? And is this the real deal? Like, is this actually the way they honestly feel? Or is he just not putting out maybe some of the urgency that has to be taking over this football team right now, because this is the way they do their business and this is they go about things? I'm just interested in your thoughts on how Mike in particular and the coaching staff are handling the results early on, despite being right in games, but losing games they used to win.
Yeah, he's always very measured, and you're never going to get anything from him from the perspective of the media, that's for sure. But it's, that's been a big thing about their culture is win, lose, or draw. It's consistency they want, right? And through all the games they won last year and all the games they've already lost this year, their environment stays the same and their process is the same. So I guess as a player, you're not on that roller coaster. And, there are no changes. You have your process defined, and you understand it does work for this team, this culture they've identified. That being said, though, sooner or later reality sets in, and it's been a good 5 years, I think, before they've been in dire situations or mission critical scenario like is unfolding right now for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So I think as good of a locker room as you can have, this is what tests it fully to the max. You really lean on your veterans, you really lean on your captains and the room collective to weather the storm. And if Howie presents himself to the media as any indication, they're going to keep their heads down and keep getting after it. And you obviously never want to see your head coach panic or waver or get flustered or frustrated to a point that there is no correcting the ship. But things they're taking on water right now, so it's it's getting very, very testy. I would imagine right now, especially in closed doors. Mike's a very competitive guy. He's a very fiery guy as well. So I can imagine that what he's been presented to us in terms of the public eye, I would think that things behind the scenes are much more testy and elevated in terms of the tempo.
Hey, just last one. What do you expect Saturday night when this team goes to Toronto, trying to get to 3-5 against a team that just lost to their arch rival, who happened to be 0 on the season before last week?
Yeah, I want to keep believing that this football. I'm not going to believe to the point that I'm going to make them my fantasy picks. Let me tell you that right now. I haven't had a Winnipeg Blue Bomber on my fantasy picks for the longest stretch in 5 years as I've had right now, but. I do believe, I keep thinking that this is going to be the week that Zach rights the ship and the defense continues to build and with their new pieces, and special teams continues to improve as well. So I do think, with the quarterbacking situation in Toronto, I think the opportunity is there. I'm a little worried about Janarian Grant, and that's a whole nother story we could have on a whole different show. And, some of the nuggets that come out about, his availability and what they could have got him for, what price tag, it's kind of looming to the surface right now. And what has he already got? 3 or 4 returns for touchdowns in 6 games. So that'll be an interesting scenario to see unfold. But I do think they certainly have an opportunity with the quarterbacking situation in Toronto that they can take advantage of. And I hope 3-5 sounds a lot better than 2-6.
We know what Mike Miller's special teams unit's going to be focusing on in practice this week. That is for sure. Doug, listen, this is an absolute pleasure having you on the program. Keep up the great work with DT. Thanks very much for doing this, and hopefully maybe we can do it again later on this season. Thanks again.
Sounds good, my friend. Talk to you soon.
You know what? Big Doug Brown, Bomber legend, at Doug Brown 97 on the X machine. And again, Saturday night, Bombers and Argos. Big one for Winnipeg after dropping that one to Saskatchewan last week. And it is getting to be crunch time to get these wins. We mentioned the schedule coming up. An Argos team that's no joke, that will be in a very ornery mood after losing the Ticats last week. And then a home and home against the BC Lions. It's been a strange season so far, but the games are huge going forward. We'll be all over here for the next couple of days, getting you ready for the game. We'll have Ed Tate and more joining us before the weekend here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. All right. Great to have Doug on the program. Doug, always a very well-dressed guy. Guys, if you are looking into that closet and realize you need to up your menswear game heading into some weddings and, of course, the fall, get on down to F Apparel, the leaders in custom men's clothing in the Peg. Custom suits beginning at $400, along with chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an incredible selection of menswear accessories. If you are having a wedding or are in a wedding party, make sure to talk to the fellas at F about a 15% discount when the guys get their suits for the big day at F. And the best thing about it is you'll be able to use that beyond the big day, much better than dropping a bunch of cash to rent the tux and then having to bring it back. They're at 190 Smith Street downtown. Find out more online or make an appointment to come in for a fitting at F. That's EPHapparel.com. Wednesday, you know what that means? It's Wingy Wednesday down at Next Door at 116 Sherbrooke, adjacent to Goodwill Brewing. The Cosmos boys are always cooking up amazing, amazing food there. But Wednesday's a special day for all you wing lovers because a pound of their amazing wings are just $15, and they bring out the sauce cart. Over 14 house-made sauces that you can mix and match to your delight. And when you crush all those wings and they were so damn good, you can get another pound for $15 if you want. Pop down today, you wing lovers, for Wingy Wednesday at Next Door in the heart of Wolseley at 116 Sherbrooke. And don't forget, the Cosmos guys not only cooking up great eats at Next Door, they're also feeding everyone down at the beer can all summer at 1 Granite Way, just over the Osborne Bridge, and 7 days a week, 12 months a year. South Osborne Hoagie Boys, the best damn sandwiches in town. Got to shout out our friends at Royal Sports. We're just talking Bombers. If you do need Bomber gear for the upcoming games, maybe the trip to Labor Day, get on down to Royal Sports. Great Bomber selection, including tons of sideline exclusives that you might not find anywhere else. New NFL merch coming in by the day, getting ready for the upcoming season. Cannot wait for NFL. Of course, Jets, international soccer, tons of Canada gear just in time for the Olympics, not to mention the hockey superstore in town as we get ready for next season. And soccer, softball, baseball, bikes, running, disc golf, tennis, they've got it all. And if you're heading for a camping weekend, check out that massive Yeti section over on the King's Skate, Snow, and Surf side. Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway. Follow them on Insta at Royal Sports Winnipeg for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. And hey, we are back to 4 days of CFL action, unlike last week when somehow there was nothing happening on the Thursday night. But that means 4 nights of CFL football at your local Boston Pizza. You want to get together for the big game, especially Saturday when the Bombers are taking on the Argos? Get down to BP. The game will be on the big screen with big sound. And you can always count on ice-cold schooners, world-famous BP wings, gourmet pizzas, and more. Pop on to your local BP today. Or if you're hanging out at home, get the great taste of Boston Pizza by ordering online at bostonpizza.com. All right, Remo and I will discuss the latest on the women's soccer scandal coming out of the Olympics in a few minutes. Apparently, the Canadian Olympic Committee was doing a press conference in the last hour or so. So we'll see whether we've got any more details of that. But there was big news today in Edmonton, which meant there was no lock shop. And I definitely wanted to talk to my pal Peg Gregoire about the upcoming Olympic golf and the golf tournament this weekend. I figured what better chance to get P. Greggy to jump in and maybe take a quick look at some cool bet lines for the Olympics and more. Patrick, what's going on? How are you?
Doing well, Huss. Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure coming on WST. I'm kind of surprised. I thought you would have went with Jake, given the news, because with the Spygate going on with Team Canada, we know he is a Patriots fan, so he's pretty well versed when it comes to teams cheating. But I'm here to talk some Olympics instead. Super excited. It's crazy to believe that, like, we've already got games going on right now in soccer. Like, the Olympics are here, and if you haven't checked out the Coolbet tab at Coolbet, there are a lot to sprinkle on. You and I have already talked a little bit about basketball and a little bit of the golf, but I think this year, like, the team sports for Canada have never been set up for more success here. Like, I think some of the big events could potentially come home with some big hardware for Team Canada.
Yeah, yesterday when we were kicking around and we were on Coolbet, we were looking at the, Canada's medal hopes, and the over-under for Canada for gold medals was 6.5. The over-under was 22.5. But it's fun to kind of dive into these individual events. And I will just tell you right now, I mean, if you go over to Coolbet, normally you've got all the sports. It's almost like it's doubled right now because you've got the Olympics and then, football, which obviously is soccer, basketball, tennis, athletics. And there's athletics and swimming is, it could take you an hour to get through. Golf, beach volleyball, hockey, cycling, rugby, water polo, table tennis, triathlon, equestrian. I did have to ask you, is Evdog and the boys in the back, how are they progressing on breaking odds? Because as you well know, breakdancing is now in the Olympics. We were joking earlier on the Lock Shop this week. That might be the toughest odds-making job in the history of competitive sport, knowing that it is a brand new sport to the Olympic Games. I don't think anyone is really sure how it's going to go, how it will be judged. And if that would make it that much harder to be the guy responsible for throwing out lines on the top B-boys and B-girls in the world.
Well, it's funny you said that. And that's actually a conversation of discussion going on right now. Breaking news, not up at Coolbet yet, but I'm working hard because our guy, Philip Kim, a.k.a. Phil Wizard, is apparently a very high medal hopeful. And if he's Canadian And if he has a chance to win, I don't care if it's breakdancing, if it's soccer, whatever it is. If there's a chance he's got hardware hanging from his neck, I want to bet on him. So we are currently working on getting those odds up there. It might be just a Canada special in the exclusive tab. So Phil Kim to win gold, or sorry, his B-boy name, Phil Wizard, to win. So I'm working hard on that, because if there's an opportunity to bet on breaking, I'm gonna give. I know you're gonna sprinkle a little.
I'm in on Phil Wizard. I'm in on Phil Wizard, and I want to. I need to have a little piece. Can you imagine if 50 years from now, when we're talking about the greatest Olympic wins of all time, we can say, hey, I was on. It'll be like I was on Patrick Mahomes at 40-1 for MVP in his first season as a starter. I was on Phil Wizard to get on that podium at the Olympic Games in Paris in 2024. Listen, the big story right now, and we're going to dive into it a little bit more in a bit, is this drone, basically, the WNT becoming the Patriots of international soccer. Canada right now, 2,000 plus 2,000, so 20-1 to win the event, and 6-1 to get into the top three. I mean, that is a little startling, just because Canada has been one of the top teams in the world, and they've medaled for the last 3 Olympics and are the defending Olympic champions. Man, when you think about the World Cup, the turnover of this team, no Christine Sinclair, of course, our own Desiree Scott is actually there as a reserve now, wasn't originally on the club. It has changed a little bit, but in the meantime, a bunch of other of the top soccer nations have really seen their women's teams improve, and that makes for a pretty wide open event. But at the same time, we just lost Pat. We'll get him back right away. It also makes for a bigger challenge for the Canadian team. And then you wonder, what is all the controversy do to our Canadian women? I mean, Patty, the players have to deal with all of this, and completely unfairly to them, as they've got nothing to do with this. They're going to be asked about it and the questions, and I do wonder what it does to the Canadian preparation. I was pretty excited to try to roll with the women and, at least see if they could get back to the podium. I think that their job got a lot harder through no fault of their own with everything that's happened this week.
And just when you thought that there was some good juju around Canada soccer, it feels like, one step forward, another 2 back. Very great point you bring up, Huss, because I do feel like Canada was a little bit slighted here. Yes, no Christine Sinclair. The roster looks a lot different, but I felt like this group was coming into this tournament with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, feeling that they were disrespected. But now there's going to be a little bit of a distraction, or I shouldn't say a little bit, a big distraction. 2 of their coaches headed home, not going to be there. So for me, I do feel like this is a big obstacle that they're going to have to overcome. New Zealand, again, they're heavy favorites to beat New Zealand here. But with all the distractions going around now, I don't know if they are going to be able to overcome all of this and find their way onto a podium, or do they take it another way? Do they use this as a rallying point and forget all the noise on the outside,
like the Patriots,
like the Patriots do, right? A little internal, they hate us because they ain't us mantra. Maybe they do go full Belichick. I don't know. But for me, I certainly, now looking at this, I'm not rushing to the bet window to place my futures bet on them. But with that being said, I think you're going to find out a lot about this group and the resilience of this team based on the way that they play against New Zealand. Just looking at the betting odds right now for that opening game, which does go early tomorrow. So, when you are thinking about betting this game or even any of the futures, those odds are going to shut down. I think they might actually be closed at the moment because there are a couple of games going on right now, but Canada's minus 400. So you'd have to bet them to either win by a goal or something, because laying juice down for plus 400 is certainly not going to be worth it. But I think we'll learn a lot about this group after, I don't even want to say after the first game, but even after that opening few minutes of the game to see how they do come out and if they do come guns a-blazing.
Yeah, they're big favorites. I've got it up right now in front of me. Minus 435 for Canada, draws 5-1. New Zealand's 13-1 on the home draw away. You can get Canada minus a goal at minus 137. But the real test is going to be game number 2 against the French. And what's wild is that, okay, we're playing France. In France, they already would have been, we know how soccer, the crowd can really be impactful in the matches, and they were already going to be up against it. Well, you add this gas to the fire as the bad guys, if you will, and I very interested to see what that environment is like. And frankly, how the Canadian women are welcome tomorrow against the New Zealanders. That game going at 10 a.m. tomorrow. By the time we're on the air tomorrow and actually into the lock shop, we'll be getting the final results of that one. Pat, we love talking golf on our program, and we'll get to the 3M in a minute. But just pulling up the golf odds. I mean, Xander was always the Olympic gold medalist, but he never could get it done in the majors. Now he's won 2 of the last 3 major championships and heads to Paris to defend his Olympic gold medal. No surprise that Scottie Scheffler is the favorite at plus 350. Xander at plus 550, though. You want to talk about an exclamation point? It seemed like Scottie Scheffler had won the Player of the Year about 2 months into the season. This is a 2-horse race right now. And I got to think that if one of these players wins the gold medal, it probably, even though it's not part of the PGA Tour, would go a long way, regardless of what happens in the FedEx playoffs, to making them the Player of the Year. What do you think about Xander's chances to just keep it rolling and repeat as the gold medal winner?
I mean, how do you not think that this is the best value on the board when you consider Scheffler is plus 350? Like, you can't stomach that. It is the Olympics. I know it's not considered an official PGA event, like you said, but I think that there is just as much pressure as there is for a major event. And dare I call Scottie Scheffler an Augusta merchant? Okay, no, I'm not going to go that far, but that is one of the only bigger tournaments he's been able to win. Xander used to be a choker, and I think the tides kind of turned when he won that Olympic gold medal, when he won 2 majors in 1 year. We talked about on the lock shop. This season is very historic for Scottie Scheffler for what we're seeing from, individual tournaments. And when you look at the analytics at the strokes gained, it's insane. It's crazy. But when you look at the big events, it's been Xander who showed up, which is so crazy to consider. Now this guy might be the big game hunter of this group of golfers right now. Would it surprise me if Scottie, ran the table and won a gold medal here? Absolutely not. Wouldn't be surprising at all. Need to clean up his putting game for sure. But I think when you look at what Xander's been able to do on the big stage at plus 550, no doubt, I think I would consider betting that. I already bet him at plus 900 on Sunday morning when he was making that charge, or just before he made that charge. That's dropped down to 550. I think we saw it earlier this week. It went from 500 to then 600. Now it's back to 550. I don't see it getting any lower. I probably don't see it getting any higher than plus 600. So if you wanted to wait a little while, you probably can wait a little bit for Xander.
I was blown away that it went from 5 up to 6. I guess everyone thinks he's just going to be crushing so much brown liquor in that claret jug over the next little while. He might not be ready to go, but back to 550, and that seems where he's settled. Hey, listen, quickly, let's get to the 3M Open, because people always love our Wednesday lock shop, and we do have some picks. We've got some Greggy's Golf specials. Listen, Tony Finau, my guy, is the favorite at 10-1. I'm still a little shook by round 2 from the British Open, and it is a short number. He has won here before, but there's a couple guys that really intrigue me for this tournament. Our guy, Akshay Bhatia, actually, we're getting him at 22 now. He was 20 before. This is a great time to get in if you like Akshay. 22-1. But the guy that I am most excited to bet this week is Luke Clanton. the AM, he had a T2, a top 10 so far this year on tour. And this is a tournament. I remember a great moment in Lock Shop history, having Matt Wolf at this event shortly after he turned pro and he got the win. This is a tournament with a bit of a lighter field that we often see some of the best young players come in and do serious damage. And I will say, with what he's shown on tour so far this year, I think that is very much a possibility at 28-1. I'm going to be backing him, and we'll see what happens. The other guy I love is Hollywood Hoagie, Tom Hoagie, who comes in at 33-1. Truly, certainly one of the most accomplished players of this field, and a guy that is from just down the way in Fargo, North Dakota, of a lot of friends and family there with him in and around the Twin Cities. So I do like Hoagie on that. Who's getting your outrights? And then we can fire up the exclusives.
I love that Clanton play. This is a tournament where I think some young guys can pop here, and guys that can putt really well as well. And Clanton's flat stick has been absolutely fire, as we've seen him really burst onto the scene in his rookie year since turning from AM to pro. But for me, I'm actually sticking with some of the, I guess, some vets, some younger guys. It's got a little bit, but I'm sticking with the guy that was an absolute nightmare to follow, and you already mentioned him, Tony Finau. Just a disastrous Friday, but you mentioned he's won here. He has some course familiarity. He's gaining over 2 strokes against the field when playing at TPC Twin Cities. He's got a great record here, not just the win. He's been in the top 10 3 times. His results since 2019, T23, T3, T28, a win, and then a T7 last year. I think when you look at this field, there is a clear drop-off between Tony, Sam Burns, and maybe another guy who's on my card. You talked about him, Bhatia. I really think from a talent perspective, he is right below those 2 other guys I just talked about in Finau and Burns. He really matches this course very, very well. You need to be a long hitter here, but it's also really important on a lot of these par 4s and par 5s. There is water all over the place. So you need to be an accurate driver of the ball. There's not too many more accurate drivers of the ball than Akshay Bhatia. Right now, off the tee, he ranks 10th in stroke gains, tee to green, with driver-heavy courses. Also in the 24 past rounds, he's 7th in stroke gained off the tee, and he's 10th in approach as well. Since switching over to that broomstick putter, and I know that is a bit of a controversy in the golf world, but since switching over to that big stick, he has been great rolling the rock. I think he could get his second victory on the tour this year.
Should be third.
Should be third. You are totally right. It should be his third. 2 other guys I'm targeting: Taylor Pendrith, a cool bet Canadian golfer. He's 33-1. I mentioned it. You got to be long. You got to be accurate. I know Pendy can get a bit squirrely off the tee, but he hits the ball so well without his driver that on some of those holes with some water, he can use, a driving iron, and he can use a 3-wood, and he can hit those as long as some guys can hit their drivers. Also, the thing that's just been such a turnaround for Pendrith, and the reason why he's playing so well, is his putter. His putter is one of the best on tour. He's 5th in strokes gained putting in the field and 12th overall on tour. He's also 11th in driving distance in the field here. So Pendy 33-1. I think this is a great course fit. And Mac Meisner, no, not Mark Messier, as if you look at it quickly, you'd think that's what his name is, but 50-1, he's starting to heat up. This is probably one of my longer shots, one of these younger guys that I feel like could pop off at any moment. He was almost leading the entire Barracuda this past week, just a little bit of a slip up on Saturday and early Sunday. So he still finished, though, solo 4th. He's got 3 top 25 finishes in a row. And this is a guy that has had some really good results in some other tournaments as well. He had a T5 finish at the Charles Schwab and a T10 at the Valero. And he's also ranked 12th in proximity, which certainly will help at this course.
Folks, so that's what we like kind of for the outrights. If you go to the Cool Bet exclusives, there are a bunch. And listen, I'm high on Hadwin this week.
Yes.
We got plus 125 on any Canadian in the top 5. I always love when we go head to head between our two Cool Bet guys. Pendy, who's minus 145, and Adam Svensson at plus 122. But there's a couple. The Greggy's Golf Special has been good to people this year. Burns, Badia, Bradley, and Mitchell all to make the cut. That's at plus 260. If you want to get Badia and Sahith both to be in the top 20, that's plus 465. We'll be throwing out our lock shot parlay. We'll get that added to it. And where we're going with, we're doing, I believe it's Akshay, Tony, and Clanton, top 20?
Yes, all top 20. Yeah, we'll get that up. We'll try to get that up probably maybe by the end of this show, if not shortly after. Follow us, myself, Haas, or at P. Greggy, or of course, Cool Bet Canada. We'll make sure to tweet that out. But Haas, before we end on these specials, I think my favorite special, here, no doubt, because we do know it is a big women's week of golf with the KC Women's Open. So Taylor Pendrith and Brooke Henderson both to finish inside the top 10, 12-1. I love that bet.
I'm in on it. Brooke, listen, it's fun. And Brooke is maybe the proudest Canadian of any of our golfers. She wants to be getting into form before Paris. And listen, Pendrith is absolutely capable of making that. Hey, before we go, Pat, I was talking to Jake earlier, and I know we've got a lot of people that when they do like to bet, they're doing it at Cool Bet along with myself and Dusty and you guys in the lock shop. We've got a new promo to have a pretty unbelievable weekend in Las Vegas. Why don't you give a quick rundown of just how people opt in and if they win the raffle, what awaits them in Sin City, because it is a hell of a package.
It is a dream sports trip down in Sin City. I mean, even in the off season, you can have a lot of fun in Sin City. Imagine in the heart of the sports calendar, the fun that you can have down there. Basically, what happens here is for every $50 you wager in the sports book or every $75 you wager in the casino, you'll earn one ticket into the raffle per week. So it's every time you hit that 50. So it doesn't mean a $50 bet on the Bombers or a $50 bet for Taylor Pendrith to win the 3M Open or $75 while playing blackjack. It's every time you hit that $50 or $75, you will then earn a ticket. So the more you bet, the more you're playing in the sportsbook, the more you're in the casino, the bigger chance you will have to win with more tickets. But all it takes is just one raffle ticket gets you in, and it's a pretty remarkable prize. 2 round-trip flights to Las Vegas, a 3-night stay, hotel accommodation, and then 2 tickets to an NHL game and 2 tickets to an NFL game. We've got 4 options for you as well. They're all on the weekend, obviously, with the NFL, so there was a limited amount of options. When you do go to the actual landing page with all the details, the terms and conditions, when you do go down to the T&Cs, you'll actually see the 4 dates that you can choose from. I won't run through them all, but I will say there is an October weekend that includes the defending back-to-back Super Bowl champions, the Chiefs, in Las Vegas. So I know Huss is going to be working real hard to try to get his name as many times in this raffle.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, I'll be in that raffle a few times, that's for sure. And I was fired up because I was planning on going to that game anyways. And I'm just looking and realizing that the Knights do have games on both Friday and Saturday that weekend. So a few options for you. It should be good. Patty, thanks for jumping on today, and of course for all the support. Let's get it. Let's come in hot to the Olympics coming out of the 3M. I'm looking forward to jumping on our lock shop partner parlay. Our outrights are in, and let the Olympics begin.
Breaking news. When you go to Canadian Olympic specials,
Yes.
Philip Kim, aka Phil Wizard, to win gold plus 250. Let's go.
Oh, right on. History will be made. Patty, take it easy. Have a good one.
All right, see you, boys.
Give him a follow on Twitter at @PGreggy, our pal Pat Gregoire. And Pat, normally with myself and Dusty every Wednesday, making our golf picks, and obviously pops in as well throughout the week on Lock Shop as well. And again, if you haven't played a cool bet before, use the promo code WST on your first deposit. Get a 100% bonus up to $200. Just finishing up the cool bet lines. Take a quick look at what is up in the CFL. And we've had a little bit of line movement. Riders now 3.5-point favorite, or underdogs, I should say, to Montreal. Alouettes -3.5. The Stamps are still a 1-point favorites in Ottawa. Bombers and Argos is a pick'em on the money line. Bombers +1 at -120. And the Elks are now 3.5-point favorites against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Why, I have no idea. And if you do believe that the Bombers are playing possum with the rest of the Canadian Football League, we have not seen a number this big on the Bombers to win the Grey Cup in probably 3 years or more. +750 right now, behind BC, Montreal, Saskatchewan, and Toronto. Thanks again to Pat for jumping on. Hey, shout out to all the Gold Eyes that are taking part in the All-Star festivities down south in Kansas City. And congratulations to Sam Cates and Hal Lanier for going into the Hall of Fame. The Fish are going to meet back up down south of the border. They're back next week. Go to goldeyes.com and make a plan to get out to the ballpark ASAP as the team's on a 6-game heater going into the break. Got to shout out our friends at Assiniboia Downs for that great night last night. Don't forget, no Wednesday night racing today, but we will be back at it Monday and Tuesday of next week, and make plans to finish off your August long weekend with the running of the Manitoba Derby on August 5th. Thanks again to Sherry and Darian for the great hospitality last night at Assiniboia Downs. A big thanks to our friends at Aikens Lake for their support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. I'll be there in a couple weeks. Look for incredible master angler tales from yours truly coming back from Aikens. I've done it before. I hope to do it again. And from looking at the social feeds at Aikens, there have been plenty of very, very happy and proud fishermen coming off the water with master anglers, Century Club, and more. As to find out more at aikenslake.com about the Aikens experience. Any availability remaining for 2024 and already booking well into 2025. And hopefully you'll be seeing me show up on some of their social feeds at Aikens Lake with some big ones. Check them out if you haven't seen them before. All right, let's get to this is actually in some ways a why not. It's not a why not question of the day, but it is a why not update of the Not Autocorp Men's Amateur Provincial Championship. It is a 2-horse race, and they are coming down the stretch. Drew Jones and Braxton Kuntz were tied at 4 under through 14 holes. Jones from Shiloh has just birdied the 16th hole. He sits at 5 under par right now with a 1-shot lead on Braxton Kuntz, who joined us a couple days ago. The 3-time defending champion looking to make Manitoba golf history with his 4th consecutive amateur championship. Jones birdied 16. He has a 1-shot lead on 17 and 18. We'll pay attention to that throughout the remainder of the show. And again, if you just go to golf_Manitoba, there's a link if you want to follow that right through. Of course, Braxton, pride of Breezy Bend, a longtime member, grew up there playing through the junior program, and definitely a source of pride for everyone at Breezy. If you want more information on Breezy Bend, go to breezybend.ca for more information on 2025 membership options. And of course, unbelievable spot to host a wedding if you're looking for a spot for that. All right, let's get Remo back in here because we do have, and I know we did the why not question of the day earlier today for Not Autocorp at Waverly and McGillivray on the Bowman situation. Seemed like the majority of people were not cool with Bowman getting hired by the Edmonton Oilers. Can't say I'm entirely surprised at the result of that. But Reem, before we finish up, we've got to get to the details of what is happening with the Canadian women's national team. And as I said, I feel brutal for the players because this is completely outside of their control. But I was making kind of Patriots jokes. This is basically another Spygate situation with the coach of Canada using a drone to spy on the New Zealand training sessions. And it is really, I mean, a big Olympic scandal before the event even kicks off.
Yeah, Canada's defending gold medalists in soccer, and Joseph Lombardi, an uncredited analyst with soccer, is being removed from the program. He's getting sent home, and this is after they reviewed 2 separate drone incidents during a New Zealand practice. And Jasmine Mander, who's the assistant coach that Joseph Lombardi reports to, also being sent home. And the coach, Bev Priestman, removed herself voluntarily from the match against New Zealand on July 25. The rest of the Canada soccer staff undergoing mandatory ethics training. And I guess Bev Priestman saying that she, didn't tell anyone to go record a drone. I don't know if this guy Joseph Lombardi, who's an unaccredited analyst, went by himself, says, "Hey, I need to analyze. What's the best way to do that? Get some drone footage." Or was there a meeting saying, "Okay, we need to get a drone. Someone's going to fly it"? I'm looking for reports, of, how they noticed the drone or anything, and I haven't seen those details. Just a lot of details about the sanctions. So
I've got it right here. This is from the Saint Etienne prosecutor,
okay,
who put out a press release pertaining to the Canadian drone incident. This is translated. Shout out to Devin Haru for putting this up. But I'll just hit the police in charge of the surveillance of the Auguste Jury Stadium were informed by the supervisor of the training site of the presence of a drone hovering over the stadium. The supervisor had been alerted by the team manager of the New Zealand team, who had also suspended training upon seeing the drone. They proceeded to arrest the pilot, Canadian national, aged 43, who had indeed filmed a closed-door training session of the New Zealand women's team using a drone. It was seized, as were all the electronic video analysis devices used by the pilot during the search. He explained that he was a sports coach for youth soccer teams in Canada, was in France for other duties as an independent sports analyst, working for the Canadian Soccer Association on behalf of the women's team, and as such was part of the Canadian delegation. The images captured by the interested party showed the players applying instructions given by their coach. He admitted the acts committed had initially been kept under wraps. The assistant coach of the Canadian team, to whom he had informed his visit to the New Zealand team's training site, was also interviewed, but declared she had nothing to do with the acts committed and was therefore exonerated. This is an absolute mess. That coach is out. This guy is out. Bev Priestman is out for game number 1 against New Zealand. They'll be without their head coach and assistant coach and their video analyst. And there's much more to come on this. And Bev Priestman, in her statement, said, quote, "I am ultimately responsible for conduct in our program." And she voluntarily removed herself from coaching tomorrow's opening Olympic match. Just an absolute mess. And as I say, it looks terrible on Canada soccer, but for our women's team, who are the defending Olympic champions, Reem, totally an unfair situation to put these women in, who are going to be definitely public enemy number 1, I'd imagine. Usually that's the Americans' job. I have a feeling it's the Canadians, and Canada plays France in their second match.
Yeah. Wow. Do we need to start putting an asterisk on the gold medal
gold medal in 20?
Is that why they were able to do so well in penalties? Because they had used a drone to pre-scout. Well, no one took away any of the Patriots titles, Huss, so we can still celebrate that. But Canada did 1 minute ago announced an independent external review. Devin Haru with CBC, who does an incredible job reporting on Olympics, Paralympics, curling. They said, as leaders of Canada soccer, we want to express our unequivocal disapproval of the actions taken by members of our women's national team staff at the games. On behalf of our federation, we offer sincere apologies. Canada's always sought to prioritize integrity and fair competition. We understand that competing with honesty is a baseline expectation for all Canadians. We failed to meet those expectations, and we apologize. So they're going with an independent external review, going to address everything. And is
this the new Dublin inquiry? We had the rap of being the cheaters from the Ben Johnson thing for how long?
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got back to being, kind of a lovable country that I think a lot of people, like and sort of pull for outside of their own. And now this. So, I mean, it's a mess. I feel sorry for the players. Shame on anyone that was involved in this. And I really think this is going to be damaging to our chances to get back on the podium again in women's soccer. We'll have more on this tomorrow, and we'll have a game to talk about because that Canada-New Zealand game is at 10 a.m. tomorrow as the Olympics are on. We've got soccer matches today, rugby sevens matches today. Both continue tomorrow. Opening ceremonies are on Friday for the London Olympics, which will give us some other fun topics to talk about here on the program for the next couple of weeks. All right, if you're with us on YouTube, do not go anywhere because we are coming back in a matter of minutes with a live edition, the latest episode of CFL 110. I see Jeff Hamilton warming up his rubber arm in the bullpen. He is going to be coming in, bringing some heat. The latest on the Bombers and the entire Canadian Football League coming up next on CFL 110, presented by Garage Living Winnipeg. Thanks again to Doug Brown, Pat Gregoire, Brandon Rewucki, who jumped on today, and all the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. Stay tuned. Thanks to all you podcast listeners. And by the way, if you're just catching this right now on the pod, search CFL 110 wherever you get your favorite podcast. Make sure to subscribe there. But if you're with us on YouTube, don't go anywhere because CFL 110 is next right here on the Winnipeg Sports Talk channel.
Oh my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.